Welcome, everybody. This is Pat Bailey, Director of Training, and we will get started on our Building Bridges Part 3. We're going to have some opportunities to have some discussions today, reviewing Part 2, looking at some of the business case discussions that we had, and then we're going to go into Part 3, which is Allies and Action Planning, and we're going to have more of a chance to talk, so I'll mute your lines in a little bit. Be thinking about we did a review kind of what areas you wanted to work on this year and what your ERG might be working on. So we'll get into some more depth on that. But let me just go through the program overview. Again, we're going to talk about, we're going to put this all together from what we learned in terminology and concepts in the business case and start talking about action planning. The biggest aspect for Out and Equal that we found over the years is that when we present this information and individuals take it back into their companies, they're the ones who know who to talk to, how to get it started, how to get it staffed, how to make those changes. And so we step into kind of a supporting role. And sometimes that's through classroom training or sometimes webinars like this, or even just as a resource in consulting. So as you think about your role as you go forward from this class and what you're learning, think about how you're going to kind of use that. Let's do a quick review from last week when we talk about employees and what they're looking for in the workplace. Starting out with policies in non-discrimination. And that is now a global criteria based on the Corporate Equality Index that you protect sexual orientation, gender identity, and we recommend including gender expression. If someone looks like they're gay, they could be fired, and in a court case, if they are not gay, they wouldn't be able to claim discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. It's just the perception, remember, of how they look is an issue. So making sure that your company has those, and again, with President Obama's executive order this last year, looking at your contractors. Everybody who is doing business with you, is that something that you can talk with your contracting office and ensure that those participants in your company and your finance and economic growth are also believing and working on the same areas and have sexual orientation and gender identity protections. Then for employees themselves, a lot of benefits. When you get married in the United States, there's that 1,138 benefits that you get around taxes and insurance and all those areas. So what employees are looking for, LGBT employees, is obviously that tax equity. Now, some of this is changing as we see marriage going through and more people can get legally married and recognized at the federal level. Those benefits are the same, but many times if you get married in one state, live in another state, that's a lot of what the Supreme Court decision that was just heard last week is talking about and trying to say states need to recognize that across the board. But employees should get the full benefit package. If I work with somebody and we're doing the same job and they get X amount of benefits, and in many cases that's up to 40% of your benefit package besides your salary that you get. So that's an important piece. So we should be able to get the same. And corporations have been doing that for years by creating privately funded 401ks and insurance programs so that employees can get that. And things like time off policies, some of the more, day-to-day. If you need to go take care of your kid or if there's time off for adoption, all of those things should be able to be covered and available to you as an LGBT employee with a family with same-sex partners. We're looking more and more, the discussions are happening now about relocation and international assignments. We looked at the maps last week and we talked about the fact that in some countries it's a criminal offense to be LGBT, and if a company sends you there and doesn't know you're LGBT, it puts you at risk and obviously can cause a lot more problems both for the company and in the state and for the individual and the employee, and makes decisions about taking your family an important part. So more and more we're talking about relocation and international assignments and making sure that we're letting everybody know that here's the laws. For example, if you're a woman and you go to Saudi, here's the laws and how the culture you should act and behave to not cause problems and draw attention to yourself as a foreign national. And we should be doing the same thing around LGBT, because for many individuals, they may not even realize if they're not out, if they're not using these resources, that they should be paying attention to those issues in those countries. And then, of course, child care and adoption time we mentioned already. But the other part is looking at your providers. If you have a call center for your insurance or for any of your other benefits, are those individuals trained and understand when someone who's transgender calls what they're asking for and how to support that? One of the things we see in the workplace is, for example, a woman who becomes a man, an FTM, transgender, in terms of matching their gender identity with WPATH criteria, is that if they don't have all the surgeries, they might still need to get an annual Pap test, say. And if you're identified and coded as a man on your ID, the insurance company looks at that and goes, you shouldn't be getting an annual Pap exam. And so they will disallow the claim. You have to call in, you have to explain, you have to come out. And sometimes it takes several levels of talking with your provider to make sure that that gets covered. So thinking about that and understanding, helping those providers give better customer service, because when you call a provider, you're not thinking about this is a separate company. This is my company who's doing this, and why am I having such a hard time? So a lot of times you'll see medical care being avoided by LGBT employees because they just don't want to go through that process of having to explain all that to the doctors or insurance as they go through that. We also talked some last week about quality improvement, things like what do we know about our LGBT employees and collecting some data. If your company is working on self-ID either through anonymous surveys or through HR records, there's a lot of work that's being done, and if you're just beginning to have those discussions or thinking about that, one of the best sources to look at is the Federal Viewpoint Survey, and that is the federal employees survey that they've done. They added, back in 2012, 3 demographic factors to that survey. They asked if you had a disability, if you were a veteran, or if you were LGBT. And now that they've got a second year of data in 2014 to take a look at that, they're looking at their LGBT employees, and still small numbers that are reporting, but it's still an indication that your LGBT employees are even less satisfied than average. And for the HR folks in the audience, you know, if your satisfaction is below the average, that usually means you're looking for a job or you're not performing as well as you possibly could. So that's an important piece to think about as we go through this, to make sure that you've got that data. And the goal is basically, once you get that 100% on the Corporate Equality Index, the next striving and goal for your ERG and your organization should be making sure you've got that positive workplace climate, that no matter where you work, in what state, in what city, whether you're manufacturing, hourly, salaried, whatever your position is, that you feel safe to be out as LGBT. And a lot of times that climate piece is the hard part, and we talk about engaging middle managers to be able to make sure that that happens. Many companies that we've talked to are beginning to put in a requirement for their middle managers that they have a diverse team, and that diversity includes LGBT. And so all of a sudden, when the middle manager is looking at, you know, what's in it for me, and it's my paycheck and my bonus and my end-of-year evaluation, the manager will step in and take care of a lot more problems. And that goes for around women and people of color, generations, all the issues that you see. If the middle managers are empowered to take care of those issues and realize that it's important and see that as a management initiative from the top down, they will get more proactive in stopping any comments and looking at that climate. And we've seen a lot of good improvement based on that. So all of those changes get put together in our 20 steps to workplace equality. And again, this is up on the website, and there's toolkits. So based on where your company is and where you're working on, you know, is it about, you know, we're still trying to get that 100% with our policy and benefits? You know, are we looking at self-ID and trying to change our climate? Or are we beginning to speak out in terms of local and national issues and community involvement, starting to go to Pride events, starting to sign on to amicus briefs? Those are all areas that you can continue to work with a company, because many companies who have achieved, you know, very top ratings in terms of LGBT workplace inclusion are now becoming mentors and benchmarks for other companies so that they can talk and help work with them. And we see many of those companies work together at our annual summit, where they get a chance to share that expertise and give that toolkit back to other companies to take back to their workplace. Because it's an unlimited pool of information that you can really start to. It's only limited by our creativity and what else we started. This advocacy frontier that we've used has changed 3 times since I've been here, since 2008, that some of those things we thought were never possible, like supplier diversity or global policies, were not even on the chart at that point. And now we're starting to see those as standard and accepted best practices that companies are using and looking at. So you can create this for your own ERG and say, what do we have already? What have we accomplished? What are we working on in terms of maybe short-term goals that's possible? And then what are our long-term goals? How do we do this? Is it a virtual ERG that ties together all of our members? You know, is it about the marketing piece where we begin to move from just LGBT publications to mainline marketing? I don't know if everybody's seen the Wells Fargo ad with the interpreters that has recently come out, but that's a great ad that's playing on mainline TV and talks about that involvement and engagement with the community. And every single time those commercials show, people get educated. You might watch Ellen DeGeneres, you might watch the Logo Channel. You're seeing a lot of LGBT discussions. The media is also helping with that, so it's important those images are good. So that's just kind of a very high level. And again, thinking back about where your organization is, we'll get some chance to talk about that, but I wanted to make sure we kind of close that out this week to talk about that as review. So I'm going to unmute you if you've got any questions. If you've got a question, you can raise your hand. Up on the top is, on the top left, there is a raise your hand button, and if you'd like to ask a question, please go ahead and do that. And I've also got a couple more people who have joined us, so let me unmute them and get them to introduce themselves. I got somebody who called in from 202. Who's that?
Hello, yes, this is Kristen Smiley with Edelman.
Hi, Kristen. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Great. And I'll put you back on mute. And somebody who called in from 256. Who's that?
This is Don Clark. As usual, we had security problems.
Of course, Don. we love that. Welcome. And let me meet you back. And I've got somebody else from Out and Equal who's called in. Who's that?
Hi, everyone. It's Stephen Healy from Out and Equal Development.
Hi, Stephen. Welcome.
Thank you.
And one more from 615. Who's that?
This is Ron Snicker with UBS.
Excellent. Ron, welcome. Okay, good. We got everybody now. And welcome. And again, we've got this recorded, so if you missed any parts in the beginning, you can always come back and check on that. So let's see, I've got a couple of questions. Let me unmute Kirsten here. Let me jump back up to the top. Okay. Kirsten, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm looking at the advocacy frontier, and out on the outer perimeter are climate surveys that include LGBT questions. Where can I find benchmarking materials? Who's doing it, what their responses are, and the kinds of questions that they wrestled with internally and satisfied for themselves what those questions were. And I'm thinking most specifically of the bugaboo of constructive notice.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the legal side of that, back in 2008, the Community of Practice on Voluntary Self-ID created a basically toolkit that talked about how to do that and address some of those issues. Those are there. And that's in a report that's up on the university page on Out and Equal under Resources. There's also up on the new Salesforce community group, we've got that Community of Practice still continues, and there's a lot of discussion that goes on with groups that are there. I also have some information from recent presentations that we've done, so I think we could probably find a company that we could match you with, thinking about either through surveys or HR records that we've got those resources.
And I've seen the materials that I'm looking for as an executive summary.
Okay. Let's see. There is one out there. Let me go dig that up. As we've transitioned from GroupSite to Salesforce, and we're still moving a lot of the data over there. So I think we've got a couple of those executive summaries. So let me do that. Drop me an email so I remember to do that.
Thank you. I will.
Thank you. All right. Great. All right, Kirsten, I'll mute you back. Suzanne, let me get you up here. Hang on a second. Okay, Suzanne, go ahead.
Hi. Could you talk a little bit more about the LGBT recruitment and career development metrics on the outer band? What type of metrics would those be?
Well, what we're beginning to see is companies that have reached out with Reach Out MBNA in the accounting and banking area, Lavender Law. There's a new OSTEM group that is starting to recruit for LGBT. Some of those companies are beginning to are keeping records of those folks, of where they were recruited individuals from. So they're the early stages of that HR records, so they can track somebody who comes through their company and how they're doing as an out LGBT employee. We've also been seeing more and more discussion about the need, and there's no metrics yet, but we know from anecdotal stories that there are a lot of individuals who end up not being entered into the recruiting process because their ID doesn't match their presentation, or they went to a different college. Again, the example I used, my friend who graduated from a women's college and is now a man. That recruiters don't always know about the fact how to deal with LGBT employees, and we know the legal and illegal questions, but they don't necessarily make the best decisions about moving someone forward and looking at their skills and abilities. So there's a lot of work going on about how do you train your recruiting staff, how do you partner with your ERG. Several companies are doing that, so that when you're going out to a major event and you're going to be recruiting, bring someone who's LGBT who can talk to those employees who self-identify as LGBT, because the numbers do indicate that even non-LGBT employees are looking at companies to see how they treat the least of their employees. And in that case now, the big discussion is obviously around LGBT. And if a company doesn't have the protections and the policy and the benefits, they're not even going to apply. So there's an impact to talent. And there are a couple of business studies that have that data. And again, if you drop me an email, I can send you some of that data in terms of how that impacts recruiting. We're also this year at Summit going to be talking some more about retention, because we're kind of addressing the recruiting portion fairly well, but retention, they're finding that 3 or 4 years in, many employees are jumping to another company in the same sector who might have better benefits for LGBT. We saw that when Barclays announced imputed income for domestic partners, that there was a quick rush from the other banking companies to include that because they realized that people would change jobs simply to get the better benefits.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne. Let me put you back on mute. And I got one more person who just came in to join us here. Hang on a second. Let's see. Somebody joined us from 650. Who's that?
Yeah, Pat, it's me, Dennis Finello. Once again, I had to switch to the phone. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. No problem at all. All right, thanks, Dennis. I'll put you back on mute. Okay, great. So good questions. And I know Don made a comment that he was recently on a Disney cruise, and they had several display photos in the photo store of gay couples and families. So another visual image that you get to see. That's great. So let's talk a little bit about allies and action planning. This is kind of the focus of today's class. And I'm going to show a quick video. This was put out by Chase, and let me run this video here. So I'm going to put my headset by the speakers so you're going to hear a little rattling, and then we'll kind of watch the video here. 1, 2.